In a time long ago, before the world was as it is today, there lay a small village on the island of Madagascar, surrounded by endless forests and towering mountains that touched the sky. The village was a simple place, with modest huts built of wood and thatch, and narrow paths winding between gardens of cassava, rice, and maize. The people who lived there were bound to the land, their lives intertwined with the rhythms of the earth. They knew when to plant and when to harvest, how to fish in the river, and which herbs to use for medicine. But the forest that surrounded them was not just any forest, it was vast and ancient, stretching as far as the eye could see. To the villagers, the forest was alive. Its trees whispered secrets in the wind, its shadows moved like living creatures, and the animals within were thought to be messengers of spirits. At night, the villagers would gather around the fire and tell stories of the things that lurked in the depths of the woods, creatures older than memory itself, spirits of the forest, and the one they feared the most, Trimobe, the giant. Trimobe was not like any man. He was said to be as tall as the tallest tree, with skin as tough as bark and hair like tangle vines. His eyes glowed in the dark, 2 points of light that pierced the night like stars, and his voice was like thunder, shaking the very earth. The people spoke of him with hushed voices, for Trimobe was not just a giant, he was a force of nature. Some said he was born of the forest itself, that he was its guardian and its wrath, come to punish those who disrespected the land. No one knew where Trimobe came from, but all knew of his anger. For years, the villagers had heard stories of his wrath. They said that he would appear out of the darkness, his great shadow falling over the village like a cloud. Those who ventured too far into the forest, those who hunted too many animals or cut down too many trees, would never return. And when Trimobe was near, the very air seemed to tremble, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. But in that village, there was a young man named Andry. He was no warrior, nor was he the strongest among his people. But Andry had a keen mind and a brave heart, and he was curious about the world beyond the village. From a young age, he would wander to the edge of the forest, staring into its depths, wondering what lay within. He would sit by the river, watching the fish dart beneath the surface, and listen to the birds singing in the trees. He felt a connection to the land, a bond he could not explain. One day, the village elders called a meeting. They had seen signs, broken branches, deep footprints, and the sudden silence of the forest at dusk. They knew what it meant. Trimobe was near. The elders warned the people to stay away from the forest, to take only what they needed and no more, and to respect the ancient spirit that dwelled within. But Andry could not stay away. He felt a strange pull, a curiosity that gnawed at him. He wanted to see Trimobe for himself, to understand this giant who haunted his people. And so, one night, when the village was asleep and the moon hung high in the sky, Andry slipped into the forest, his heart pounding with both fear and excitement. The forest was different at night. The trees seemed taller, their branches stretching out like claws, and the shadows were thick and heavy. Every sound made him jump, the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig, the distant hoot of an owl. But he pressed on, his steps careful and silent. He moved deeper into the woods, where the trees grew so close together that the moonlight barely reached the ground. And then, he saw it, a faint glow in the distance, like fireflies caught in the mist. He crept closer, his breath shallow, his heart racing. And there, in a clearing, he saw him, Trimobe, the giant. Trimobe was even larger than he had imagined, his body like a mountain, his skin rough and scarred like the bark of an ancient tree. He sat by a fallen log, his massive hands resting on his knees, his head bowed as though deep in thought. Andry could see the sadness in his eyes, a sorrow that seemed to weigh him down like a great burden. Andry stepped forward, his courage bolstered by the sight of the giant's sorrow. Trimobe, he called, his voice trembling. The giant's head lifted, and his glowing eyes fixed on Andry. For a moment, there was only silence, as the two stared at each other, man and giant, mortal and spirit. Then, Trimobe spoke, his voice low and rumbling like distant thunder. "Why do you come here, young one? Do you not fear me?" Andry swallowed his fear and stepped closer. "I do not fear you, Trimobe. I have come to understand you. Why do you bring fear to our village? Why do you punish those who enter the forest?" Trimobe sighed, a sound that rustled the leaves and stirred the trees. "I am the guardian of this forest," he said. "I am bound to protect it, to keep it safe from those who would harm it. But I am also bound by my nature, to be the wrath of the forest, to bring fear to those who disrespect the land. It is a heavy burden, and one that I did not choose." Andry felt a pang of sympathy for the giant. He saw now that Trimobe was not a monster, but a creature bound by duty, by the need to protect something precious. "What if I could help you?" he asked. "What if we, the people of the village, could show respect for the forest, could work with you instead of fearing you?" Trimobe looked at Andry, a glimmer of hope in his glowing eyes. "If you can do that, young one, then perhaps there can be peace between us. But know this, I will always watch, and I will always protect the forest. If your people break their promises, I will return." Andry nodded, understanding the weight of the promise he was making. He returned to the village, carrying with him a new understanding of the giant and the forest. He spoke to the elders, to the people, and together they made a pact to respect the land, to take only what they needed, and to live in harmony with the forest. From that day on, the villagers kept their word. They would leave offerings at the edge of the forest, tokens of respect for Trimobe, the giant who watched over them. And though they no longer feared him, they knew that he was always there, a silent guardian, hidden among the trees. And so, the legend of Trimobe, the giant, lived on. The people would tell their children of the night Andry met the giant, of the promise they made, and of the peace that followed. Trimobe became more than a legend, he became a symbol, a reminder of the power of nature and the importance of respect. And though no one saw him again, they knew he was there, watching over them, the silent guardian of the forest.